paranormal side. What are you afraid of?
A Reddit post that was created on November 15, 2011 describes the events of a person who saw something in their window. It goes like this. The story says, this is from first person point of view. So, hi everybody. So here's my story. For context, I live away from home for school while my sister lives at home with our parents. Also, both our rooms face the street and are right next to each other. Also, I have a full-length mirror in my room opposite the window. So if I looked in the mirror, I see what was in the window. So around Thanksgiving of 2021, I had just gotten up. I just gotten up. Oh no, sorry, not gotten up. I just gotten home from school and was relishing. Some stuff would be mispronounced, probably. Relinching my ability to stay up late, and so was my sister. After our parents went to sleep, I was just laying on my I was laying on my bed watching YouTube. I had my window blinds open, and for some reason I felt the urge to look up, so I looked in the mirror outside. Someone pops up from below the window and bangs on it super loud 3 times, then sprints away. I am shaking on the verge of tears. I run to my sister's room and explain what has happened. She is shaken up, but chalked it up to a dumb teenager. Just a few nights later at midnight, I see a text from my sister. Did you hear that? There was somebody in the window. I felt that same fear. I take my headphones off and begin to get up when I hear 5 super loud bangs coming from my sister's room. I run over and she looks really shaken. She says, and quote, this is what the Redditor's sister says: "He just ran to the side of the house, the wall that's right next to my bed, and he banged on my wall, right where my head is." We both were frozen with fear. We made theories on who it was, but neither of us was the type to have enemies. There was no teenagers on our streets. None of this made sense. Sometimes I feel that same chill in the air, and sometimes I think I hear banging. The fear of seeing a face in the window isn't rare as many would hope, so I'm praying I never meet this boy ever again. Now, I thought this thing was created in November 2011. No, that's when the Redditor was around. But really, the post was 4 months ago. I'm trying to figure out if there's an exact date on this post. Ah, that's right. Sorry, this thing was posted on December 27, 2022. Forgive me. Anyways, yeah. Let's get to the next one. In this next Reddit post, it was a post that was made on February 4th, 2023 of this year. The post goes on to say, "This story happened to me back when I still lived at my parents' house. I was commuting to college at the time. and had 3 siblings that also live at home, my brother and 2 sisters. For some context, we lived on 5 acres in rural Ohio, surrounded on both sides by woods and farm fields. Additionally, during the week, my dad normally left for work at 2 a.m. So I had always felt like it my job to be the man of the house, because he was gone during the times when you would imagine something sketchy happening. However, on this night, because it was the weekend, my dad was home, and I woke up to the sound of my brother's voice trying to get my attention. We had separate rooms upstairs, and coming out of our rooms, you could look down over the banister and to see our front door. When I woke up, it took a few moments to get out of the haze and realize what was going on. I looked at the clock and it was around 2:30 a.m. My brother told me that there were 2 men at our front door. Now this really woke me up. We quietly walked out of my room and peeked over to look down at the front door. When we looked, there was no one at the door, but I noticed my parents off to the side out of view of the glass on the front door. I whispered down to my dad and he told me there were 2 guys who had been talking to each other and knocking on the door. Hearing my dad say this freaked me out even more. I went back into my room and grabbed my pistol, quickly shuffling down the stairs after looking to make sure they weren't at the door. If they had been, they would have easily seen me coming down the stairs, as it's in direct view of the door. My brother is right behind me as we head over to where my parents are, whispering to try and find out what is going on. My parents had woken up to us. The Redditor's parents said they had woken up to the sound of their dogs barking and had come out to find there were 2 men knocking loudly at their door. At this point, the Redditor goes on to say, the men returned and began knocking again, despite the fact that no one had come to the door and our dog was still actively barking. The fact that they were there at this time in a location where houses are spread out hundreds of yards and still knocking with a dog barking made the situation even more terrifying. After a couple of minutes, the men walked away and we all shuffled across the kitchen into the family room to peek out the windows into our driveway, which is lit up by outside light. There was a black Cadillac sitting there, but no one was inside from what we could see. Immediately, the question was, quote unquote, the Redditor says, where did these guys go? And then the Redditor continued on to say, they weren't in their car and they were no longer at the front door. Unfortunately, we figured out the answer when the handles on our back French door started jiggling. Basically, it was turning is the best way to put it into terms for simple words. You know, like whenever you hear a door jiggling, but it's not in the good way. And the post continues on to say, they were actively trying to enter the back of our house, which enters into the kitchen. At this point, I just remember my mom frantically said, David, to my dad as pure fear overwhelmed her. Then 2 things happened. Adrenaline filled my body as I prepared my handgun, horrified at the very real possibility that I might have to shoot these men. Secondly, my dad finally grabbed the phone and called the police and calmly told them what was happening. Thankfully, after a minute of jiggling, they stopped at the back door and disappeared again, only to return to their knocking at the front. However, at this point, several minutes had gone by and suddenly we saw the local police fly up in multiple cruisers with their lights on as they whipped into our driveway and front yard. The two men bolted away, attempting to run the long way around the house across the driveway. One of them disappeared out of our view, but the other one was intercepted by an officer yelling for him to get on the ground. He didn't, and he was immediately tased and fell on the ground. Some of the officers went around the house after the other guy, and one of them came to talk to my dad and I. And as we came out the front door, they ended up finding the other man hiding in my sister's little playhouse in the backyard. It appears both of them were drunk and / are high. Basically, the men that did this were more than likely drunk and high based on what the Redditor says. The Redditor goes on to continue saying, and quote, as the one who hid had illegal substances on him, which the illegal substances was cocaine. One of the men had it. And it continues on and says, while they were both arrested that night, we never did find out what they were charged with or what happened to them. Needless to say, the Redditor quotes this, the whole experience wasn't funny. Well, it wasn't fun. It's basically spit in there. So random men at our door in the middle of the night. Let's not meet again. Needless to say, always be prepared for the inevitable, is what I would say as advice. A Reddit post that somehow probably was deleted, I think, if I'm reading this correctly. Describes a true horrifying story, though. But it also has proof of videos and, well, not video proof, it's photos proof. It basically goes on to say this. Before I start telling the story, I have to say that this happens over 3.5 years, 3 to 5 years when I was between the ages of 15 and 18. All people in the story have been changed for privacy reasons. Basically, names have been changed. The Redditor goes on to say this. I grew up in a pretty good sized town. High school grades always had been between 800 and 1,000 students. The town was about 45 minutes to an hour from the second biggest city in the state, which is known for 3 rivers and many bridges. I have 2 older brothers, which means obviously I'm the youngest of 3 boys. Our mother was the general manager at my grandpa's golf course. By no means were we well off in any way, but we're far from poor. And our father was part of the state police, a lieutenant at the time of everything happening. The Redditor's dad, the Redditor goes on to say that their dad was hard on them when needed, but the Redditor says this, when we needed, but we all 3 learned to always be respectful no matter what, unless extreme situation called for not being it. I will say that due to a very dark history, I never had a close relationship at all with my brothers or parents. Even with all that, I'll admit that this made my dad and I be slightly close, even for a short time, even for very short time periods, and that we only had one thing in common, that we each protect the ones we love at all costs, even if it meant our lives. Him with my mom, with my mother and family, and I will with my girlfriend and nieces and nephews. That was in parentheses and shit. Redditor goes on to say, when I was 15, I went to the downtown area getting food and ice cream with friends at a place about half a mile from the high school football stadium. Being that we were only 15 years old, going into our 10th grade year of high school, and almost 16, we all rode our bikes to meet up. My hometown was split up into six wards. Probably spelling calculation. The restaurant was 1 to 2 miles away. I live in the first ward. It's this word. When we came back outside to leave to do something else, I realized that my bike was missing. As soon as the group and I checked the mirror, I called my dad, knowing that he was home from work, and he flew down to where I was. We all figured he'd be pissed at us, which he wasn't at all. All of my friends got to their bikes to go off in different directions towards their own homes to look for the bike. As my dad and I were driving towards the part of town we lived in, we saw a group of 3, 2 males, 1 female, walking down the street side towards the street we were on. In parentheses, it says 1.5 miles from the restaurant. The bike. My dad stopped immediately and put the car in park in the street. We jumped down and laughed. I laughed inside due to see my dad going from usual cop dad from usual to cop dad, because the redditor's dad was a cop. Well, he had the girl. While he had the girl. While he had the girl and one guy stand at the wall with their faces touching, he slammed the guy with the bike to the ground. I grabbed the bike and put it in the bed of the truck, since it was only 2 of us against 3. My dad told me to get in the truck so they don't see your face. I said, fuck that. And it wasn't until years later that I came to regret that the cops came and arrested all 3 of them. Fast forward to 2.5 years later, I was 18 years old and at home. From my freshman year in college, which was spent at a military college across the state. From home, which stuff I learned during my time at the school will help out. I was out jogging around 6 p.m. one night on the sidewalk next to the road when a car flew past me, sat at the stop sign until I passed him. Luckily, when I was close to home and memorized the car's details as much as I could, the vehicle drove and went a lot slower, and I walked into the house. When they were passing, I did not think anything wrong with the situation other than someone driving fast and slowing down upon realizing someone was jogging. Fast forward 1 week, and I just finished up another jog, walked into the house through the front door, which leads right into the kitchen, which has a big window that looks out to the driveway, front yard, the street, and stop sign. As soon as I walked into the sink by the window to splash some cold water on my face, I heard a loud boom from outside, sounding like an M80 exploding. Then 1 second of silence, and then 3 loud booms in quick succession, which, thanks to being a hunter, I knew was gunfire. I dropped down and crawled to the door, grabbed the baseball bat my brothers and I used before, and ran out the door, even though I knew a bat had zero chance of winning against a firearm, but I was hoping that I had surprised them. When I got outside, they were driving away, and I recognized the vehicle from a week earlier that sat at the stop sign when I was out jogging. Thankfully, no one was at home, and at the time, since who knows where they'd be standing or what would have happened. After the police came and I had given my statement, we waited since the town was big for a town. It was also small enough that a lot of people knew everyone. The town's police, my brothers, all joked with me, asking things like, "Did you try being a hero when no one was around?" or would ask if I was crazy due to running outside towards the gunfire without a gun. Well, 2 or 3 days had passed when we had received a call from the cops saying they had caught the guy who shot at the house. As it turns out, it was the same guy who stole my bike 2 to 5 years earlier. It says 2.5, but I'm going like 2 to 5 years earlier. After finding that out, my dad and I looked at each other without saying anything. We didn't tell my mom about it being the same guy, and that they had seen me finish up and walk into the house. Luckily, by chance, the guy had received 10 years for attempted murder with a weapon, attempted assault, but due to not a single person being injured in any way, no assault charges of any kind were charged towards him. So we went on with our lives, and I became an EMT during college, working on weekends. Then finished school. When I was 26 years old, I had stopped by my parents' house when I was in the area. I walked into the kitchen, and on the kitchen table was the town's newspaper, which the front page read something along the lines of, "Local woman missing, vehicle found abandoned and burned." As I started reading the article for a second, I almost immediately ripped the kitchen table off the frame with rage. The article said that the missing woman's boyfriend for some period of time was the same guy who stole my bike. And shot at my parents' house with me in the front window. He wasn't arrested or charged with any crime related to the missing woman at the time. I left and went back to my apartment an hour away and made sure I was carrying a pistol, except when I was working on the ambulance thing. Even through all of the rage, I was feeling somewhat paranoid thoughts of he may be following me still, even if it's unlikely. My parents left their house for a week to stay at my grandpa's house, which was empty due to him living at the golf course. Life went on from there. I still working as an EMT in the second biggest city in my state. The guy who shot at my house is currently in prison on charges of crimes not related to the murder of the lady. And then the writer shows some photos of stuff.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.